Truly, this has been a monumental effort. What do I mean by that? Well, over the last 3 years, the US government, our American taxpayers, airline labor, company managements have risen to the challenge of the pandemic. We've reached out, we've worked together, and we've saved our industry. We saved our industry. And we're ready for the comeback. But right now, as passengers return to the skies, and after securing federal aid on a scale no other industry received, no other industry, just our industry, some airlines' failure to plan for recovery threatens to cost our industry the comeback. Inexcusable. But ALPA is not about to let that happen. So let me be clear. ALPA pilots and other aviation workers got our industry to this side of the pandemic because of the resolve of everyone in this room. When COVID-19 struck, our members immediately went full throttle, max power, into driving the public health response, protecting aviation workers and jobs, and preparing our industry to seize the opportunity when recovery came. And as we're all aware, our pilots, put themselves and their families at risk flying personnel and equipment and keeping supply chains moving. And I know you remember those dark early days when we didn't know what this was, what it was going to happen, if there was going to ever be any solutions for it. Dark times. So when airline managements asked, thousands of our members raised their hands to voluntarily retire or work at reduced schedules. Our union bargained hundreds of agreements to help our companies withstand the blow caused by the drastic drop in demand. Now, equally important, working together with the AFL-CIO, and we'll hear from President Schuler later in our meeting, ALPA pilots sent messages to lawmakers. You ready? Hundreds of thousands of messages. Not just from our pilots, but from all of labor, but hundreds of thousands from our pilots. These calls to action were instrumental in the decision by Congress to pass $63 billion in federal aid for our companies here in the United States. Thanks to this historic labor protections that we made possible, the payroll support program was expressly designed to enable airlines to keep pilots and other employees trained and ready to fly. Yet, despite the enormous lift that the government and labor made to help our airlines, and the company's own commitment to use taxpayer relief to be ready for a recovery, to springboard and not, protract the pain, flight delays and cancellations are escalating. They have spiked nearly 65% since this time 2 years ago. And let me tell you, ALPA is pulling no punches in calling out those airlines that received billions in American taxpayer support to be ready to fly, but have instead failed to train and requalify their workforce. For example, in a letter to Transportation Secretary Buttigieg, I commended the DOT for ensuring that SkyWest Airlines, which had received nearly $2 billion in taxpayer subsidies over the past several years, delivers on its pledge to provide air service for America's small communities. And on the same theme, I was proud to join our other national officers, committee leaders, and ALPA members from many of our pilot groups, as well as the presidents of SWAPA and APA in supporting Alaska pilots all-base informational picketing in April. It was impressive. It had record turnout. We highlighted the Alaska pilots' 3-year fight for a market-based contract. I have to say, honestly, it was one of the most powerful examples of pilots' unity that I've seen in my 35 years. Now, great leadership over in that airline. I mean, it was really impressive. It was eye-watering. Thunderous energy as we got ready to go on that line. But like SkyWest, Alaska received $2.3 billion from US taxpayers to be ready for recovery. For years, Alaska pilots have warned that aviators who choose to fly for other airlines because of the substandard contract at Alaska. It seems that their management has not properly managed their recovery. They are now even admitting that they failed to recognize they would have inadequate numbers of pilots available to fly in April and in May. But Alaska's management has still failed to make the connection that a strong union contract attracts a strong union workforce. Now, after 3 years with little movement at the bargaining table, our national union is supporting Alaska pilots as they vote to authorize a strike. Unfortunately, it's the same story for too many other airlines. The companies held their hands out to accept billions in American taxpayer subsidies, which Congress rightly provided to save our industry. However, skyrocketing flight delays and cancellations show that some airlines haven't used the funds as they were originally intended. In fact, company managements have deliberately put pilots and other workers on the shelf and held off on training to save money. Now, it's our passengers who are paying the price. In desperation, airline representatives have resorted to distorting the facts about pilot supply in a frenzied scramble to direct and distract passengers, investors, and Congress from their failure to plan. They've mismanaged their own training schedules and are now claiming that they can't hire enough pilots. Now, the numbers leave no doubt that today there are more than enough pilots in the United States to meet demand. There are more than enough pilots in the United States to meet demand. In fact, many US airlines have more pilots, hear this, more pilots, carry less net debt, and operate at greater domestic capacity levels now than they did in 2019. They have more pilots now, less debt. Fact, airlines that offer competitive career for pilots have no problem finding pilot applicants. That is the bottom line. Their CEOs have affirmed this truth, with one recently stating that this airline has thousands of qualified applicants on fire. They're starting to crack, in other words. CEOs are now starting to come over, put a lot of heat on them. Will, I mean, it's your team that led this charge. I mean, you put that, our philosophy and rhetoric into action, and they're feeling the pain. And I think what we saw with your airline is that they finally, if you want to get out of a hole, stop digging. They stopped digging. Now we got to get the contract, right? But despite the reality, some airline representatives continue to spread mistruths to the flying public and in the halls of Congress. ALPA is fighting back with the facts at every opportunity, including through meetings at ALPA Capitol Hill. How many people, have everybody seen ALPA Capitol Hill yet? You really need to see that. It's an incredible investment that we made, and it's really paying off. In just the last 3 months alone, ALPA advocates engaged with 15 members of Congress at our union's new and notable Washington, D.C. venue. And we'll turn up the volume on our message even more during ALPA's upcoming legislative summit. So if you have the possibility of attending that, I think you really want to see this one. The plain truth, and what I'm saying here, the plain truth is that airline management should take responsibility for their business decisions to cut or reduce service to less profitable markets. You know that's what they're doing, all right? Instead, they are making excuses that aren't supported in fact, or far worse, calling on regulation rollbacks that would threaten safety. You know they're always after the FOQ rules, right? Now, the path has been different for my brothers and sisters in Canada, but we are making progress. As you know, and I think I said this at the last meeting, what was the difference between what happened here in the United States and what happened in Canada, right? We had an airline-specific aid program here in the United States, and that didn't happen in Canada, okay? And I'd asked the question, what is the reason for that? And of course, somebody answered correctly, the PAC, right? And, regardless of how you feel about how those kinds of things are financed, the PAC provides us the opportunity, right, to have meetings with important people in Congress that are decision makers, and it gives us our chance to tell our story. That's the basic bottom line. And of course, there's a lot of good and bad that all goes with that, but we didn't make the rules, but we know how to play them. So, but after months here in Canada, relentless pressure from ALPA Canada and other aviation stakeholders, the government issued a revised plan for reopening its borders. And I know, Tim, you worked really hard to make that happen. So my gratitude. Now, more work definitely lies ahead, but we're moving towards a safe and efficient return to the skies for passengers in Canada. We're also calling on the government of Canada to secure the safe return of 5 Canadians, including 2 of our own ALPA members who fly for Pivot Airlines, who were arbitrarily imprisoned in the Dominican Republic. Let's sit in for a second. We're trying to get them back, and we will get them back, but we're concerned. So I want to thanks to this executive board that the air transportation system that we have today is ready for the comeback and to continue with our gold standard on safety. I thank you for that. In addition to our commitment to the first officer qualification requirements that have reduced fatalities by already 99.8% in the United States, ALPA has worked relentlessly to protect the safety of air transportation. Under Bob's leadership, Bob, we are seizing every opportunity to reinforce the fact that the greatest safety feature on a commercial airliner is at least 2 experienced, trained, and well-rested pilots on the flight deck. Pretty simple. Airline Pilots Magazine is featuring a compelling 9-part series exploring the dangers of single pilot operations, so we'll be looking for that. Now, among other angles, in our deep dive on the issue, we're highlighting the thousands of safety regulations that are predicated on at least 2 pilots working together on the flight deck, and we'll hear much more in a special presentation later in this meeting. On another safety of flight matter, I testified in February before the House Aviation Subcommittee to underscore how interference from the activation of 5G in the C-band spectrum is jeopardizing aviation safety. Now, as everyone knows here, the risk of interference is forcing pilots to conduct extensive workarounds, often during the most critical phases of flight. Of note, the wireless company's voluntary agreement to limit 5G broadcast near airports expires. Those mitigations expire in July. Now, ALPA is warning that the current approach that's entirely seems to be based on alternative methods of compliance is a temporary stopgap and not a solution. But the good news is our voices are beginning to be heard. And a potential solution is starting to take shape, thanks to the continued pressure from Bob and the ALPA Air Safety Organization representatives, Bob. I spoke recently at the FAA's Commercial Space Transportation Conference recently. I made clear ALPA's support for the safe integration of new and expanding users of the national airspace. I also highlighted our union's efforts to bring the commercial space and aviation communities together in advising the FAA and creating a comprehensive national integration strategy. In addition, ALPA is advocating for the National Transportation Safety Board to be assigned the responsibility for investigating accidents and incidents involving commercial space operations. And I'm looking forward to welcoming today, as a matter of fact, NTSB Chairman Jennifer Homendy, who will address this board later in the meeting. Now, in more safety work, testimony by ALPA Canada on the importance of line pilot input in aircraft certification is reflected in a recent report in the context of the Lion Air and Ethiopian airline air accidents. In February, the report was presented to the House of Commons. But what all this means is because of you, the airline industry is ready for the comeback with our push for stronger aviation security and safety. Now, ALPA has redoubled our efforts to secure air transportation, including safeguarding passenger and cargo aircraft flight decks with secondary and primary barriers. But there's more. We also recently held an in-flight security symposium where we discussed the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program as a critical layer of our risk-based approach. And I know Bob and I are tremendously frustrated right now with the TSA. There are huge numbers of FFDOs waiting to get in the pipeline and to do requal and get, initial qual. And it's all due to funding. We tried to raise the budget, didn't happen. And now I'm about to go to the TSA and ask that they reconstitute some of their budget towards alleviating this, because, there's no other, the largest, Bob, we said it's the largest federal law enforcement group in the country. And I think we estimate, Bob, if we put a dollar figure to the contributions that they make as law enforcement, or what was that number again? I forget. $1 billion. Talk about value. And they pay for this for themselves, basically. It's just an incredible resource. And I just have a feeling it's going to take something horrible to happen again for them to wake up again. But, we'll keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing. I'm going to meet with the TSA administrator here shortly and make the ask. But, when we first came to office, and I want to thank this executive board's leadership, you helped us get through, government shutdown, the grounding of the MAX, and of course the COVID crisis. But you've made us ready for this comeback. And you've done it, I think, in the way we had suggested originally, is to view everything that we do through the lens of the dignity of work. If you weigh everything that you do through that, you end up in the right place majority of the time. Because there's a lot of implications about, dignity of work, right? But, for instance, our national union has backed PAL airline pilots as they recently held a silent protest in St. John's, Newfoundland, to highlight their contribution to their airline. And we supported the Delta airline pilots as they have conducted informational picketing to protest fatiguing schedules in the context of the pilots' record amount of overtime during the pandemic. And likewise, our national committees and staff had put their shoulder to the wheel behind the United pilots as they've successfully reached an agreement in principle with their management. Similarly, the Delta pilots just negotiated an industry-leading agreement on global scope. And ALPA pilots at Air Transat recently concluded a 3-year contract extension that will provide their pilots with economic improvements while helping curtail insurance costs. And agreements just reached at Air Wisconsin, at Envoy, and Piedmont make clear that regardless of how many passengers or how much cargo pilots fly, all pilots have earned the right to compensation commensurate with their contributions and strong job security and a work-life balance. The formula is pretty simple. All about the dignity of work. In one example, our union support for our pilot groups in bargaining, ALPA MEC social media campaigns have received nearly 8.7 million views. Social media, powerful tool. And it's important to note that our pilot groups at FIFA Departure Airlines are working together as never before to strengthen the dignity of work for our members in that particular sector. At the FIFA Departure Committee's recent meeting, I led a roundtable and discussed the results of our union survey of our members who fly for these airlines. And based on that feedback, ALPA's new FIFA Departure Committee Chair, Captain Matt Silker, who will be here for just a little while, there's a tremendous amount of flow going on, is leading the committee in helping our union develop new ways to support our members and address the economic and work-life issues that exist for pilots who fly this segment of the industry. Now, we know that improving the compensation and the quality of life and career paths for pilots who fly for FIFA Departure Airlines is critically important for ALPA's current members, and improving this business model is also essential for attracting the next generation of aviators. I highlight that all the time in every chance I get. So now, this includes stopping U.S. airlines from misusing the visa process to undercut U.S. workers, because that's what it does. All right, the misusing visas here in the United States. And ALPA has reached out to federal agencies as well as senior White House officials to inform them about the more than adequate supply of pilots in the United States and describe how some U.S. carriers are misappropriating visas. And ALPA is urging the U.S. government, demanding, to take decisive action to stop the misuse of certain visas. Now, while we have more than enough pilots to meet today's needs, we'll need even more qualified aviators in the future. Our union's goal is to inspire all young people to see themselves as pilots, right? Anybody who wants to see themselves and envision that. ALPA is equally focused on helping create an accessible and inclusive profession for all who are interested. Now, earlier this year, our union unveiled a plan to help to break down the barriers, right? And forge new opportunities and build a strong pipeline of qualified aviators in the future, while at the same time protecting the extraordinary level of safety in air transportation in the United States and Canada. In our plan, ALPA is calling on the government to align federal funding and support for pilot academic education and training with that of other highly skilled professions. For example, the government must do more to provide federal financial assistance for flight training for students pursuing 2- and 4-year degrees. And our union is also committed to inspiring students from all communities to see themselves as pilots. As Bill will report, ALPA reached out to literally thousands of students of all ages this year. And joined by our Education Committee and President's Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, I recently visited a school with in one day, with more than 100 pre-K kindergarten students to encourage them to learn about the work that we do as pilots. I slept really good that night. It was a long day. But I'm telling you, when you reach out to kids at that age, there was not one person. It was a clean slate when you're talking to those kids. There is no restrictions or limits in their mind. And when I tell you they were really excited about having a bunch of pilots come and visit them, it was really extraordinary to watch. But so as our commitment to creating a robust pipeline, ALPA is also insisting on an inclusive workplace. For example, we're leading the fight to promote inclusive, gender-neutral language in our contracts. We're doing the same throughout the industry, including at the FAA's Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee, which is the old Drone Advisory Committee, by the way, of which I sit on. And by advocating to change, for instance, one thing that we all decided to change together with the industry was the FAA's use of notice to airmen to notice to air missions. So, in another aspect of doing all it takes to attract the next generation of qualified pilots, ALPA is also focused on ensuring a safe workplace, the basic tenet at the beginning of the dignity of work. If you don't have a safe workplace, that's bad. That's where you start, right? But at the recent Cargo Summit, thank you, Jeremy Keys, ALPA's leaders discussed the flight deck security challenges faced by pilots who fly freight in the United States and Canada. And we've also advanced legislation to begin to address cabin air quality. And our union is standing firmly behind increasing penalties and prosecution of violent, disruptive passengers, and a no-fly list for individuals who receive related criminal or civil convictions. Now, like other professional careers, airline pilots must also be properly supported, right, when they're facing illness, stress, and distraction. And you know what I'm talking about here, right? I'm talking PA. We know that by providing this support for our individual pilots, ALPA is also creating a stronger profession to offer the next generation. And for this reason, ALPA's pilot assistance programs help ensure that pilots are mentally and physically prepared to perform their jobs. In April, I addressed nearly 200 attendees from 7 countries during the HIMSS Advanced Topic Seminar, and our union has recently held training courses for pilot peer support and critical incident response program volunteers. For decades, ALPA members in the United States have relied on the Aviation Medicine Advisory Service for its expertise, and I think you all know Quay Snyder, outstanding individual. And I'm proud that we're now offering AMAS to our Canadian members. As ALPA's president, I'm also making certain our union properly supports our members after they complete their careers and throughout retirement. That is a new initiative started recently, where you're going to provide services to our retired pilots. You have no idea how valuable that's going to be. The response that we're getting from our retirees is incredible. They're part of something great here. Part of, they're proud of being aviators. They hit 65 and it's over, right? And they lose that connectivity. But think about the people who have had, struggled maybe with HIMSS or other programs. So we're going to train pilot peer support volunteers. We're going to, work out help for people who need to continue with help. Just maintaining the connectivity throughout retirement is just going to be huge. So, but now, how do we do all this, right? How do we make all this stuff happen? Well, thanks to Joseph, all right, and the stewardship demonstrated by this board, our union does its work from a strong financial foundation. Our financial strength gives us the freedom to lead our industry, or, if necessary, to go it alone, to do the right thing on behalf of our members. Now, for example, ALPA has been positioned to support the pilot movement around the globe. Captain Jaime Hernandez Sierra, president of ACDAC, that's the Colombian Association of Civilian Aviators, is here with us this week to tell us of the Colombian pilot struggle for basic human rights to organize. Jaime, where are you? There he is, right back there. I mean, this gentleman, you just wouldn't believe what he had to go through. They were criminally charged. They tried to, not just put down the union, extinguish it. Together with the government, it was backs against the wall survival. And it was something that, we saw years coming. And thankfully, I think we were able to help join in and provide some resources. And they were very successful. And you're going to be fascinated when you hear how intricate a plan they had and what they put together. But it's extraordinary. I heard it. They invited us to come down to Bogota and celebrate this win and thank everybody who helped make it happen. But it was the most incredible, motivating presentation that I saw. You're going to really enjoy it. So, but equally, and thank you for making the trip, Jaime. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Equally important, now, ALPA's financial strengths allows us to lean in and level up the support that we provide our members. For example, the ALPA app, one of my favorite subjects anyway, is now used by more than 19,000 pilots every month. And since we launched our Flight Finder feature, ALPA app users have also conducted more than 1.5 million searches for available jump seats. And I know I told you last time, when you have their attention, there's an opportunity to communicate. So the possibilities are endless, and every MEC will be able to do that as well. You want to talk to specific LECs or your MECs, you'll have the power to do that. So, but as a result of all this, ALPA's ranks are growing and growing fast. With yesterday's vote for ALPA representation with the iAero pilots becoming the 8th pilot group to come on the board since 2019. And here's the good news. There's 2 more in the hopper right now that we should be hearing about soon. So more good news. We're growing. Now, what all this means is that across the airline industry, pilots are recognizing the value of ALPA representation as well as the importance of strong union support, beginning in their first days of flying, throughout their careers, and throughout now their retirement. And as I told union miners, the United Mine Workers of America, I went to one of their rallies, who were striking against the Warrior Met Company. I don't know if you heard what's going on down there, but it's lasted over a year. It is the quintessential example of what formed unions in this country. The conditions are horrible. The treatment is horrible. During some of their pickets, there was, it goes back to like the Pinkerton days, with the guards. People drove trucks through the line that was tracked back to the company. They were roughed up. That's what's going on down there. But what I told them is that your fight is not only a fight for you and your families, it's a fight for the dignity of work for every worker. An injury against one of us is an injury against all. There is the connectivity. It exists. That's why I've got President Schuler from the AFL-CIO coming here to reinforce that. So But as union leaders, the same is true for all of us in this room. Because in all these ways, and thanks to the leadership of this executive board, ALPA is more than ready for the comeback. And I thank you for your attention here this morning. Thank you.